For Bruce.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I'm going to address my remarks to the second reading amendment, which has been moved, calling for the government to acknowledge the need to not make cuts to the legislated superannuation guarantee for workers. And people should be under no mistake what this government is up to with superannuation. They are laying the groundwork politically, tilling the soil to trash Australia's superannuation system, and for the Prime Minister to break his promise that he made before the election that superannuation would continue to increase in line with the legislated increases, that next year it would go up by 0.5% and so on the schedule. In practice, what this will mean is that the Prime Minister is breaking his promise and that he will cut the pay of millions of working Australians and condemn people to a poorer retirement. Because the fact is, a cut to super is a cut to pay. Super is part of your pay in Australia. They can't make this false little distinction between wages and super. Superannuation in this country is part of a worker's pay, and it is incumbent on Labor to stand up for everyday Australians and defend the superannuation system that Labor built. And Australia should be proud of our super system. It's something we're rightly proud of. Superannuation is part of the pay of Australian workers now. It's no longer a privilege, as it once was, just for the elite. It's a right for everyone now, for every worker. Super provides a more dignified retirement for Australians. It makes the Australian economy stronger as well, Deputy Speaker. We now have in this country a $2.8 trillion, that's right, $2.8 trillion savings pool to invest in jobs and growth. And Australians, everyday Australians, own more of the country and more of our wealth. The fact is, without superannuation, the system that Labor built, Australia's debt and budget deficit would be vastly higher, and in the coming years our AAA credit rating would be at risk. Well, it's already at risk under this government. The fact is it would be lost if we had not provided as a country, as the Labor government in the 1980s did, for our pensions with an ageing population. But the political contrast, the battle lines are drawn on behalf of Australians. They're very clear. Labor created super. We defend the system. We're champions of increases in workers' pay through these legislated increases that were legislated under the Rudd-Gillard government. But let's be clear on the record of the government, of those opposite, of the Liberal Party. They have opposed every single cent that has ever gone into workers' superannuation in this country. Every time legislation has come before this parliament in 40 years, the Liberal Party has opposed it. They oppose superannuation. The only indication of support, in fact, has been the promise that the Prime Minister made before the last election that he wouldn't cut superannuation rises. That's the only indication we've ever heard from the Liberal Party, that they have even the tiniest level of support for super, and they're about to break it. The Liberals' plan to cut superannuation and to run the system down will leave working people behind. And they're using COVID now, disgracefully, as a cover, as an excuse to destroy super and pursue their decades-long ideological obsession with cutting workers' pay and condemning Australians to a poorer retirement. The fact is, and they said this for 5 years, when the current Prime Minister was the Treasurer and before that the Social Services Minister, they wanted to increase the retirement age for Australians, the pension age, to 70. They wanted everyday Australians to work until they were 70, and now they want to cut their super. Last week they froze the age pension. Astoundingly, they froze the age pension for the first time in 23 years. And in the budget, they will try and cut super and try and cut people's pay. It's ironic, isn't it? The party of debt and deficit. The first 3 years I was in this parliament, we couldn't get up in a question time without having this mob rant at us like lunatics about debt and deficit disaster. It's funny, and now we haven't heard anything of that, have we? Haven't heard about debt and deficit from this Prime Minister. Now he's overseeing the largest budget deficit this country has ever seen in the first recession for 30 years. Haven't heard much about that. It's not in your talking points, is it, Mr Blue Suit? Trashing super is economic vandalism. It is the biggest intergenerational rip-off this country has ever seen. What they're really saying by cutting superannuation and not providing for the retirement of Australians is, don't worry, we'll put it on the bill, we'll run up the debt, we'll run up the deficit, our grandkids can pay for our retirement. The numbers are instructive, and we've heard this before, but one of the key rationales for introducing superannuation in the 1980s, the universal scheme, was our ageing population. In the mid-1980s, we had about 6 workers for every retiree. Now it's about 4 workers for every retiree, and the projections are within 15 years there will be 3 workers for every retiree. Although with the cuts to migration, the truth is, on the projections, that day is going to come sooner. We've smoothed the curve, but we haven't changed the trend. Now, Labor in the 1980s planned for 50 years ahead. You know, politicians get accused of not planning for the future. Superannuation was one of the generational reforms in this country that provided for workers to have a decent retirement and provided fiscal security for the country. So make no mistake, COVID for the Liberals is just cover for their same ideological wars, their attacks on super, wages, corporate tax, industrial relations, privatisation. We'll see it all in the budget, with a little healthy dose of rent-seeking. The scale of the superannuation system is enormous now, and I think Australians might not always appreciate what has been built over the decades. We have 15 million Australians with superannuation accounts. 60% of all Australians now have a super account. 80% of Australians between ages 25 and 54 in that key working age bracket have a super account. We have $2.8 trillion in assets, projected to grow to $10 trillion by 2040. Now alone, it's equal to 140% of our national GDP. They're big numbers, so what do they mean? Well, firstly, of course, it means more money and financial independence for retirees. Super is now the first or second largest asset for most Australians that they have. The average balance at the moment is about $270,000 for men and about $157,000 for women. But it means that most Australians can retire with their pension or part pension and some superannuation. It's a better standard of living in retirement, and people are living longer. It's not yet enough for most Australians to replace the pension, but if we stick with the plan, if we stick with Labor's plan to legislate over the decade to increase it to 12%, it will move in that direction. The median balance will be higher, about $300,000 for women and $600,000 for men. And of course, it also reduces the financial exposure, the exposure of Australian households to financial shocks by diversifying their assets. Just a little aside on the gender gap, you can see from those figures that there's still a huge gender gap in the level of superannuation that men and women will retire with. But the Liberals' plan to cut superannuation will make things even worse for women. Right now, 40% of older, single, retired women live in poverty in this country, abject poverty. They're one of the fastest-growing groups of homelessness. Single, retired women, people pushed out of their work maybe in their 50s, people retiring after a divorce or a catastrophe of some form in their 60s with no superannuation. And a cut to super is a cut to wages that will hit women especially hard. Now, one of the economically worst aspects of the government's handling of the COVID recession, and it goes to the second reading amendment, is the government allowing people to raid their retirement savings. Instead of providing support to those who need it, the government has let over 560,000 Australians now, in the last few months, withdraw every last cent of their retirement savings. There is literally nothing left for their retirement savings. Now, it might not sound a lot, but for a 25-year-old, taking out $10,000 now means $233,000 in lost interest by the time they retire. It's enormous. It is the biggest generational rip-off in Australia's history, and it's also the privatisation of stimulus. The work that the government should have been doing on behalf of the community and all taxpayers, I know, socialising the losses caused by the economy in a much cheaper and more economically efficient way, the work that the government should have been doing has been outsourced to the lowest income, poorest people in society. What a surprise from this mob. In the last few months alone, $32 billion has been withdrawn by Australians from their super accounts. As I said, 560,000 Australians now have not 1 cent left in their superannuation account. The projections are, even the government admits, by the end of the year it's going to be at least $42 billion, with upper estimates in the order of $50 billion gone. But the real disgrace is that the largest single source of economic stimulus that the government has injected into the economy is from superannuation. They've privatised the stimulus. I mean, that's taking privatisation to a new level, even for this mob. It's bad enough to outsource Centrelink. It's bad enough to outsource the NDIA with 7,000 casual temporary workers there. It's bad enough the tax office is run by Labor hire staff. Now they've privatised their stimulus. Australians have spent more from their super on getting through this crisis than the government has provided in any single line item in their so-called response. They spent more from low-income workers' super accounts than they have on JobKeeper or the JobSeeker supplement or any other element of their response, let alone the lax administration of the scheme by the government, the fraud, the scams, the nutty government member backbenchers running around on Sky News telling everyone this is free money. Just go and have a crack, have a withdrawal, just get it out, it's free money. It's irresponsible. Now, I'm not blaming the individuals, but we've seen there's a significant percentage of people who've got the money out and haven't told the truth or haven't filled out the form properly because they've listened to these nutters on the TV. Well, the fact is that's now exposed people who've misused the scheme to severe fines and penalties, $12,500, and potentially a huge, big, whacking tax bill now in the middle of the pandemic. And compounding it, this is a gold medal award in the Olympics for policy stupidity, compounding it is the impact on every other Australian, the 14.5 million Australians who still have at least $1 in their super account, by getting these people to withdraw their money at the bottom of the market. It has a compounding effect on the problems and the values of the assets. It's the worst possible time in the economic cycle that these economic geniuses opposite would think to let people withdraw from their retirement savings, the worst possible time. The final couple of points I'll make in this time would be the two great big lies, that our snake oil salesmen opposite stand up and tell you. Firstly, about wages, that somehow they're saying when the Liberals cut superannuation, don't worry, it's a con trick, then workers will get higher wages. Work that out. If we cut superannuation, you'll get higher wages, nothing to worry about, which is absolutely rubbish. Superannuation is part of your wages, it's part of your pay in this country. Cutting super is cutting your wage. Wages, though, of course, are stagnant under the Liberals. We've had record low wage rises for years under this government. They didn't just come in when the Prime Minister became Prime Minister and knifed the last one. They came in 7 years ago, stagnant wage rises. And for many workers, next year's 0.5% legislated superannuation rise is the only wage rise they're going to see under this government. Even if the Liberals got away, though, with their plan to cancel the 0.5% rise, there's no guarantee, of course, it'll go to take-home pay. In fact, it's highly unlikely in Prime Minister Morrison's recession that for most people it'll go anywhere near their pay packet. It'll get swallowed by the employer. But the second big con trick that the government is trying to pull on the Australian people is that somehow this is going to be a choice between having a dignified retirement and having your super wage rise of 0.5%, mind, or owning a house. They're pretending that somehow it would be good for home ownership if we let everyone withdraw their super and buy a house. I mean, what a con trick. Not only is it effectively trashing the retirement income system, but it'd push up house prices. Imagine pouring that much cash into people's pocket to go and bid up house prices and leave the average Australians poorer in retirement. That'd be a runner for the gold medal in the policy stupid Olympics when they enter next year, no doubt. But the national wealth that this superannuation system that Labor built is stupendous. It boosts our national saving. It's enormously beneficial for the economy. That $2.8 trillion pool of savings helps grow the economy and invests in projects in Australia and overseas. The fact is, Australian workers now own more of the wealth that our country produces. It's a wonderful thing, that huge pool of capital that our nation has at its disposal, owned by all Australians, not multinationals or wealthy corporates. Superannuation funds now reduce Australia's reliance on foreign sources of finance. For anyone concerned about foreign investment, they should be very, very aware of the role that superannuation plays in creating an investment pool, just here and overseas. Since 2013, finally, Australians have owned more foreign equity than foreigners have owned in Australia, and that's because of superannuation, because we've got this $2.8 trillion pool of national savings that we can take and invest not just in assets and infrastructure and agriculture and productive things in Australia, but also we can take that capital and invest in other countries and other projects overseas. That's a wonderful thing because it means that we get profits from those investments overseas that come back and make Australians wealthier. And so there's a lot more to be said, and I know my colleagues will talk more, and there's another superannuation bill, and we'll be back here for more. But let there be no mistake for Australians that Labor will always defend the superannuation system that provides for a decent, dignified retirement for Australians. It makes them wealthier and also boosts our national economy. The Liberals' plan and the Prime Minister's plan to break his promise and cut superannuation and cut wages will be opposed by this side of the House.